A low, muffled moo echoed across the field, followed by the heavy thud of dozens of hooves pounding the ground. I took another bite of my chicken. The game was on. A herd of cattle burst out from the east gate, their massive bodies moving with surprising speed. A few lingered, casually chewing on dry grass, while others reveled in their newfound freedom. And then there was Brutus, the most aggressive bull, who immediately set his sights on the 5-tier wedding cake perched near the banquet table. In an instant, everything was chaos. Guests screamed as the herd charged through the seating area, toppling rows of wooden chairs and sending delicate flower vases flying. Juniper wailed in despair as Brutus slammed into the wedding cake, reducing it to a crumbled mess of frosting and ruined layers. Patrick leapt back to avoid the splatter, but his pristine white suit was already streaked with dirt from the rampaging herd. Karen spun around to face me, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, then erupting into uncontrolled rage. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice so shrill I could feel my eardrums vibrating. I wiped my hands on a napkin and tossed the empty skewer into the mess Brutus had made. Oh, looks like my cows didn't get an invite. Guess they just wanted to join the fun. Sipping my fresh morning coffee, I couldn't help but chuckle as I replayed those scenes from Karen's big event. Have you ever had your land taken over for something like this? Let me tell you what happened that day. Leave a comment with the number 9 so I know you're ready for this tense but hilarious story. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what's coming next with me. Wishing you a peaceful day. I'm Wyatt Callahan, 42 years old, a farmer living on the quiet outskirts of Copperfield Ridge, a small town nestled between gentle hills in the American South. I was born in the Wild West, where vast lands and clear blue skies shaped my childhood memories. For the past 18 years, I've poured my sweat and soul into turning this patch of earth into a modest but steady farm, a peaceful retreat from the noise and trouble of crowds. I don't meddle in anyone's business, and I sure don't get tangled up in the antics of the local homeowners association. That morning, I jolted awake to the sound of laughter mixed with the soulful hum of a saxophone carried on the faint scent of lavender drifting through the window. Frowning, I wondered if I'd lost my mind. I hadn't invited anyone over. I stumbled out of bed, rubbed my eyes, and peered through the glass. My heart sank. My land, my private sanctuary I'd tended so carefully, had been transformed into a lavish wedding venue. Dozens of glossy white chairs dotted the lawn, leading to a vibrant floral arch draped with hydrangeas. Near my cattle barn, a team of gray-vested servers bustled about, prepping fancy platters. A 5-piece jazz band played softly by the creek, and at the center of it all, barking orders like she ruled the world, was Karen, the Homeowners Association president who'd long treated my property like her personal playground. I stormed outside, my old leather boots crunching on the gravel, my chest tight with a mix of disbelief and fury. This had to be a mistake. Maybe they'd gotten the address wrong. Maybe someone had botched the plans. But as I got closer, my eyes landed on a big sign propped between 2 pines. Welcome to Juniper and Patrick's wedding. Names I'd never heard before. That's when I knew this wasn't a mix-up. This was shameless entitlement, pure Homeowners Association style. Karen turned as I approached the front row, her face lighting up with fake cheer. "Good morning, Wyatt," she chirped, waving a stack of papers like she was doing something noble. "Look at this. Gorgeous, right? The whole neighborhood's going to be talking about it." I stood there, too stunned to process it. "Karen, what the hell are you doing on my land?" She let out a little laugh, the sound so airy, it made me want to grind my teeth. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a tiny wedding. We needed a beautiful outdoor spot, and honestly, your place is the best. You should feel honored. The bride's family is a big deal." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check despite the fire ants crawling through my veins. "Karen, this is my land. You can't just set up a wedding here without asking me." She shot me a look like I was some kid bothering her. "Don't be ridiculous. This is for everyone. We messaged you about it, but you never replied." "You never messaged me," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "You don't get to decide to hold a wedding on someone else's private property." She sighed, flipping through her papers like they held some magic answer. "The HOA rules allow us to use suitable spaces for community events." I crossed my arms, standing taller. "Karen, I've told you a million times, I'm not part of your HOA." She waved me off like it didn't matter. "Details, details. You live here, don't you? That means you contribute to the area. It's just one day. Don't make a fuss." Before I could argue back, the bride and groom strolled over, their faces glowing like they'd won the lottery. The bride, a woman with sleek black hair piled high, beamed at me. "You're Wyatt, right? Thank you so much for letting us use this place. It's beyond amazing." "I didn't let anyone use anything," I said, straining to stay calm. "Karen set this up without asking me." The groom, a guy in a shiny suit with a smug grin, laughed. "Come on, buddy. It's not a big deal. Just one day. We've paid in full and guests are already arriving." I pressed a hand to my forehead, feeling my patience unraveling. "Who did you pay?" Karen jumped in, her tone so smug I could barely breathe. "The HOA, of course. A very reasonable fee, if I do say so myself." I stared at her, my mind reeling at the sheer audacity. She hadn't just taken my land, she'd profited off it. My land, my home, and she acted like she was doing me a favor. "By the way," Karen added, flipping her papers slowly like she was taunting me, "the catering trucks couldn't find parking, so we borrowed your driveway. You don't mind, do you?" I turned to look, and sure enough, my driveway was blocked by a line of vehicles. Catering vans, flower trucks, even a long white limo. I couldn't even get my own truck out to escape this madness. My stomach churned with rage. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only Karen could hear. "Get it all out of here, now." She smirked, dripping with sarcasm. "Wyatt, don't be so dramatic. The ceremony starts in 45 minutes. Go inside and relax. It'll be over soon." My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My land invaded, my driveway blocked, strangers trampling my grass, Karen profiting off my hard work, and now I was supposed to sit back and watch these clueless people turn my home into their stage? Not a chance. Karen turned away, basking in her smugness, waving to new guests like she owned the place. Juniper and Patrick went back to their final preparations, oblivious to the fury boiling inside me. I let out a long breath, trying to steady the chaos in my head, then pulled out my phone. "Hey," I said when my farmhand picked up, "open the east gate and let them all out." There was a pause on the other end. "All of them?" I glanced at Karen, now laughing with some HOA cronies. "Every single one," he burst out laughing. "Got it, boss." I slipped my phone back into my pocket and strolled over to the banquet table, casually grabbing a skewer of grilled chicken. If they wanted a wedding on my land, I'd give them a real farm experience they'd never forget. I stood by the table, nibbling on the chicken, watching Karen glide through the crowd like some self-appointed overlord. She shook hands, flashed fake smiles, acting as if every inch of ground beneath her feet had belonged to her all along. Juniper and Patrick were busy with their final touches, oblivious to the fact that they were trampling all over the place I called home. My eyes drifted toward the distant cattle barn. I knew what was coming, and the thought sent a thrill down my spine. Karen and her guests had no idea their perfect little event was about to go up in smoke. The first sign of trouble hit when the catering crew near the barn froze. One of them, dressed in a blue chef's coat and a baseball cap, pointed toward the newly opened gate, his face pale with panic. Then came a deep, rumbling moo that rolled across the field, followed by the heavy thud of dozens of hooves slamming into the earth. I took another bite of chicken. Game on. A herd of cattle exploded from the east gate, their massive frames moving with startling speed. A few wandered off, lazily munching on dry grass, while others pranced around, giddy with freedom. And then there was Brutus, the meanest bull of the bunch, who locked eyes on the 5-tier wedding cake sitting pretty near the banquet table. It all unraveled in a heartbeat. Guests screamed as the herd barreled through the seating area, flipping rows of wooden chairs and sending delicate vases crashing everywhere. Juniper let out a desperate wail as Brutus plowed into the cake, turning it into a heap of smashed frosting and crumbled layers. Patrick jumped back to dodge the mess, but his spotless white suit was already streaked with dirt from the stampeding chaos. Karen whipped around to face me, her expression flipping from confusion to shock, then blazing into unchecked fury. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice so piercing I could feel my eardrums hum. I wiped my hands on a napkin and tossed the empty skewer into the wreckage Brutus had left behind. "Oh, looks like my cows didn't get an invite. Guess they just wanted to join the party." Karen's jaw dropped, then snapped shut, words failing her. She turned to survey the disaster unfolding. A group of older guests tried to flee, but one cow had parked itself in the exit path, trapping them. Another unlucky soul stepped right into a fresh pile of manure, his fancy shoes now a total loss. Then the goats showed up, smaller, faster, and downright mischievous beyond belief. They darted across the field with wild abandon. One leapt onto the gift table, scattering carefully wrapped boxes in every direction. Another clambered onto the sound system, its tiny hooves stomping wildly, turning the smooth jazz into a jarring, ear-splitting mess. And finally, the goose arrived, and it was furious. My favorite troublemaker, a big, rowdy bird named Captain Ruckus, took one look at the chaos and decided it was time to take charge. With a deafening honk, it flapped its wings furiously and charged straight at the nearest target, Patrick. The groom let out a choked yelp as Captain Ruckus pecked at his legs, wings thrashing in a lopsided battle for dominance. Juniper, in a full-blown panic, rushed over to yank the goose off, but that only fired up Captain Ruckus even more. I leaned against the banquet table, watching it all play out like a top-tier drama on live TV. Karen, her face flushed red and her whole body trembling with rage, spun toward me again. "You did this on purpose, didn't you? Call them back right now." I shrugged, my voice cool and steady. "They're the locals here. You're the ones crashing the place." The guests were in full meltdown mode now. A few climbed onto chairs to dodge the cows lumbering by. The bridesmaids huddled behind the serving table, wide-eyed as a curious goat nibbled at their dress hems. An older guy squared up against Captain Ruckus, waving a napkin in a pointless attempt to reclaim some dignity. Juniper burst into sobs. "My wedding's ruined!" Patrick, still wrestling with the goose, shouted in frustration. "Who's dumb enough to throw a wedding on someone else's land without asking?" I smirked at Karen. "Good question." Karen, finally realizing she was in deep, tried to claw back some control. "Everyone calm down! It's just a little hiccup!" But a loud crash cut her off. One of the cows had wandered too close to the drink station, knocking over a table loaded with red wine glasses. The pricey liquid spilled across the ground, mixing with dirt and bits of wrecked wedding cake. I took a long breath, satisfaction flooding my chest as justice started to take shape. Karen couldn't take it anymore. "I'm calling the cops right now." I clapped my hands, my tone brimming with excitement. "Oh, go right ahead. I'd love to see how they handle an unpermitted wedding on private property." Karen stood frozen, her mind racing for a way out of this mess. Meanwhile, a few guests had already slipped away, bolting toward their cars to escape. Juniper was still sobbing, mascara streaking down her face, clutching her tattered bouquet like it was the only thing holding her together. Patrick, finally free of Captain Ruckus, turned on Karen with a glare full of fury. "This was your insane idea," he growled, brushing goose feathers off his suit. "You told us everything was taken care of." Karen, teetering on the edge of collapse, tried to muster some shred of authority. "It was fine. I can't believe it turned out like this." Patrick muttered something under his breath, then faced me, his voice weary. "Look, I don't know what she told you, but I swear we had no idea this was unauthorized. If I'd known, I'd never have set foot here." I studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. He still had that smug air I didn't like, but at least he wasn't as delusional as Karen. Juniper, between hiccuping sobs, suddenly screamed, "Karen, you ruined my wedding." Karen, completely cornered, stood there helpless under the weight of the disaster crashing down on her. I spread my arms wide, a wave of relief washing over me like I'd just shed months of pent-up frustration. "Gotta say," I called out, reaching for a lone cookie left on the now empty banquet table, today's one for the books. Karen's eyes snapped to me, blazing with rage like she could burn everything down, but she knew she had nothing left to cling to. The wedding was officially a wreck. Guests had either fled or were wiping themselves off. The venue she'd bragged about was now a chaotic mess of livestock, trashed decorations, and pure humiliation. I strolled back toward the house, glancing over my shoulder one last time at the scene. Behind me, Captain Ruckus let out a final triumphant honk, making Karen yelp in panic again, the greatest wedding ever my way. Karen stood amid the ruins, her pricey silk dress splattered with cake frosting, her hair a wild tangle from the humid air, her reputation hanging by a thread ready to snap. The once glamorous wedding setup now looked like a war-torn battlefield. Chairs lay scattered, flowers were trampled, leftover food littered the grass, all thanks to the curious cows still casually munching on whatever they pleased. Juniper slumped on the ground, crying into her shredded veil, while Patrick paced back and forth, muttering curses non-stop. Some guests were still trying to flee. Others stood stunned, staring at the aftermath like they'd just woken from a nightmare. I leaned against the wooden fence, arms crossed, quietly watching Karen unravel with a satisfaction I couldn't quite put into words. She kept opening her mouth, then closing it, grasping for excuses, but nothing came out. The HOA members gathered around her, some whispering, others staring with undisguised judgment, like they'd just realized the massive mistake she'd made. The first accusing voice cut through the air, coming from Juniper's mom. She'd been shrieking for 20 minutes straight, wiping her daughter's tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Karen, you said everything was handled. You said this place was legit. You swore the landowner agreed." Her voice was so shrill it made a few people nearby wince. Karen's lips trembled as she tried to reclaim some control. It was supposed to be. I mean, Wyatt doesn't even use this land for anything important, so I thought." Juniper's dad, a man who looked like he'd just watched his life savings blow away, stepped forward, his presence towering. "You thought? Do you have any idea how much this wedding cost? We paid the HOA tens of thousands of dollars. Look at this." He flung an arm toward the chaos. A cow had wandered over to the last standing floral arch, chomping on the dangling silk fabric. The gift table was flipped, envelopes and boxes scattered across the dirt. The sound system, wrecked by a goat, still had the little troublemaker perched on the speaker like a victorious king. Karen flailed her arms, desperate to pin the blame on someone else. Her eyes landed on me, her face twisting with anger. "This is all your fault. You let those animals loose on purpose. You sabotaged this day." I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "And who gave you the right to turn my land into your stage? The HOA?" The HOA members started backing away, a few looking uneasy. One of them, an older woman with thick glasses, spoke up. "Karen, you said Wyatt agreed. We only approved it because we trusted you." I let out a dry laugh. "Approved? You don't get to approve anything on my land. I'm not part of your HOA, remember?" Karen's mouth gaped, speechless. The world she'd so carefully built was crumbling right in front of her, and she had no idea how to stop it. Juniper, wiping smeared mascara from her face, glared at Karen with raw hatred. "You lied to us! You lied to everyone!" Patrick, brushing hay off his suit, ran a hand over his face and let out a heavy sigh. "We want our money back. Every single cent." Karen forced a laugh, the sound high-pitched and brittle, fooling no one. "Oh, well, we'd have to discuss that with the HOA's finance office first." Juniper's dad took another step forward, his face red with fury. "You mean the finance office you run?" Karen swallowed hard, realizing just how bad this had gotten. The HOA had collected money for an event with zero legal grounding, and now everyone wanted it back. I stood there, waves of satisfaction rolling through me as guest after guest turned on Karen. Even the other HOA members started distancing themselves. Someone muttered about misused funds and a vote to oust the leader. Things were getting ugly for Karen, and I knew they were about to get uglier. Just when it seemed like it couldn't escalate further, the distant wail of police sirens pierced the air. The authorities had arrived. Karen spun around, panic overtaking her. "Oh, thank God. Officers, arrest him. Arrest Wyatt now. He's the one who let those animals loose and ruined everything." 3 uniformed cops stepped into the scene, taking in the disaster before them. One adjusted his hat, another pulled out a notepad. "Who owns this land?" one asked. I raised my hand, my voice calm. "Me." The officer nodded. "And you didn't authorize this event?" "Never." Karen let out a strangled noise. "He's lying. He just wants to cause trouble." The cop ignored her, turning back to me. "So these people paid the HOA to hold it here?" I nodded, gesturing toward Juniper's still fuming family. "That's right. Paid straight to Karen." The officer turned to Karen. "So you took money for an event on land that doesn't belong to you?" Karen's face went pale. She stammered, grasping for an escape, but there was nowhere left to run. Juniper's dad stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "We've got all the receipts right here." Karen looked like she wanted to disappear. The officers exchanged a quick glance, then one spoke up. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us to the station for some questions." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen's eyes widened, panic taking over. "What? No. That's absurd. I didn't do anything wrong." I smirked. "Guess you can explain that in court." As the officers escorted a still protesting Karen toward the patrol car, the remaining guests started gathering their things. Juniper, trembling, gave me one last look. "I'm sorry anyway." I nodded slightly. Next time, check who owns the land before you open your wallet. She sighed, her face blank with defeat, then walked off with her parents. Patrick trudged behind, looking like he was wondering how his life had come to this. The leftover HOA members, watching their proud leader hauled off in a squad car, avoided each other's eyes, whispering about an emergency meeting. One of them, an older guy with a stern face named Walt Ford, turned to me. "I'll be in touch later." I grinned, looking forward to it. As the last car pulled out of my driveway and the sirens faded, I stretched my arms wide, letting out a deep, satisfied breath. Captain Ruckus strutted by, flapping his feathers like the true champion he was. I gave him a pat on the back. "Good job, buddy." Then I headed inside, wondering what the HOA might cook up next. Whatever it was, I'd be ready. The next morning, I, Wyatt Callahan, woke up hoping for a rare taste of peace, but it seemed the universe had other plans. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand, and when I reluctantly picked it up, my farmhand's voice came through, half teasing, half exasperated. "Boss, you better check the front yard. We've got company." I let out a heavy sigh, threw off the covers, and dragged myself out of bed, irritation flooding through me. After the humiliating disaster Karen faced yesterday, I'd figured she and the HOA would lay low for a while. Turns out, I'd underestimated her insane level of stubbornness. Stepping outside, I immediately spotted a city utility truck parked right up against my fence. 3 men in crisp shirts and slacks stood beside it, hands on hips, eyeing my property closely. And next to them, Karen was chattering away, waving a thick stack of papers like she was arguing a landmark case. I exhaled sharply, adjusted my hat, and walked over. "Morning, gentlemen. Anything I can help you with?" One turned to me, nodding with a polite but stiff air. "Mr. Wyatt, we've received multiple complaints about violations on your property. We're here to inspect." I almost laughed out loud, but instead I just crossed my arms. "Complaints from who?" The second guy cleared his throat, glancing at Karen, who now wore a fake look of concern. "From some HOA members," she chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet, as if the whole neighborhood hadn't just watched her fall apart. "You see, your livestock caused a disturbance, and we've heard this land might be violating local zoning rules." I tilted my head, a prickly feeling spreading through me. Zoning violations? That's funny because I've owned this place for 12 years and never had an issue until now. Karen let out a dramatic sigh, clutching her papers to her chest. "It's not personal, Wyatt. This is about the community's stability. After yesterday's unfortunate incident, people are worried your land isn't being managed properly." I let out a short, incredulous laugh, shaking my head. "Let me get this straight. You hijack my land for a wedding, get caught, get dragged off by the cops, and now I'm the one in the wrong?" Karen's face twitched, but she quickly regained her composure. "Let's not dwell on the past, Wyatt. We need to look forward." The first inspector coughed lightly, looking uneasy with the situation. "We just need to take a quick look around, Mr. Wyatt. If everything checks out, we'll be on our way." I considered telling them to get lost, but then figured I had nothing to hide. Besides, I was curious to see how far Karen would take this petty revenge scheme. I stepped back, waving a hand. "Go right ahead." The 3 inspectors got to work, walking the property, jotting notes, occasionally glancing back at Karen, who trailed them like a smug shadow. She kept pointing at the barn, the fence, even the water trough, as if she was dead certain they'd find something wrong. But the longer they checked, the more her frustration showed. Finally, they came back to me, flipping through their notes. "Mr. Wyatt, everything's in order. This land's zoned properly for agriculture. The livestock's well cared for. No violations to report." Karen's smile vanished. But what about safety? Those animals are dangerous. That goose attacked my guests." I smirked. "You mean Captain Ruckus?" "Yeah, he doesn't take kindly to strangers trespassing." The inspectors exchanged a look, unbothered by her argument. "Ma'am, livestock on a farm isn't a violation." Karen's face flushed red. But the noise, the smell, and what about—" The second inspector cut in, polite but firm. "Ma'am, everything here is within regulations. If there's nothing else, we'll be going." I bit back a laugh as Karen stammered, her mouth opening and closing like she was fishing for one last accusation. But she had nothing left to grab onto. The inspectors packed up, gave me a final nod, and climbed into their truck, leaving Karen standing alone in a cloud of dust. She turned to me, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles went white. You think this is over?" she hissed, her breath heavy. I leaned against the fence, flashing an easy grin. I'm hoping so. Karen took a step closer, her face crimson with rage. You humiliated me. You destroyed everything. Do you know how much that wedding cost? Do you have any idea what I've lost because of you? I raised an eyebrow, my tone calm. Let me guess. The HOA's turning on you? Karen let out a bitter laugh. You bet they are. Cowards. Always have been. The second things get tough, they ditch me. I gave a small shrug. Maybe if you hadn't lied, hadn't taken over someone else's land, then tried to cover it up, they wouldn't have. Karen's jaw tightened, and I could feel the tension radiating off her. You think you're untouchable, don't you? I sighed, my patience wearing thin. Karen, go home. But Karen didn't budge. She took a deep breath like she was steadying herself before going on. You'll regret this. I'll make you pay. A surge of irritation flared in my chest. Karen, the only reason you're not in jail right now is because I haven't sued you for trespassing and fraud. If I were you, I'd walk away and hope I keep being generous. For the first time, Karen faltered. A flicker of fear crossed her eyes, maybe the moment she realized she'd truly lost. Then, with a sharp turn, she stormed to her car and peeled out, tires screeching against the road. I let out a breath, running a hand through my hair, still feeling the weight in my chest. I knew Karen too well. She wasn't the type to let go easily. She'd cling until there was nothing left to hold. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an HOA member. Emergency meeting tonight at 8. Karen's about to lose control. Thought you'd want to know. I smirked. Things were about to get interesting. That evening, I sat on my porch, sipping a cool glass of water as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was calm, with only the faint sounds of livestock settling in their pens. A total contrast to the madness of the past 2 days. I knew it wasn't over yet. Karen wasn't one to go down quietly, but the cracks in her empire were showing. If that text was right, tonight's meeting would be her breaking point. I wondered if I should go. I wasn't part of the HOA after all, and I had no interest in their petty squabbles. But the idea of watching Karen squirm, facing the fallout of her own arrogance and lies, was too tempting to pass up. I stood, brushed the dust off my pants, and headed toward the neighborhood meeting house, a faint smile tugging at my lips. When I got there, the meeting was already underway. The room felt thick with tension, almost suffocating. The HOA members sat in their usual rows, but this time, there were no polite whispers or forced smiles. Instead, there were sharp glares, hushed arguments, and a simmering anger ready to boil over. At the center, Karen sat rigid in her chair, gripping the armrests like they were the only things keeping her upright. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a quiet satisfaction settling in as I took in the scene. A board member, an older guy with gray hair named Lester Hargrove, stood up, clearing his throat with authority. All right, let's get to it. We all saw what happened at that wedding. We all know who caused it. Karen straightened, forcing a tight smile. Exactly, and I think we should talk about the real problem. Wyatt doesn't care about our neighborhood rules. His animals... Lester raised a hand, cutting her off. Karen, enough. We're not here for Wyatt. We're here for you. A wave of agreement rippled through the room. Karen's face twitched, but she tried to stay composed. I don't understand. I've only done what's best for everyone. A woman in the front row, Delphine Warwick, let out a scornful laugh. You took our money. You lied about the wedding venue. You nearly got us all in legal trouble. That's not what's best. That's insane. Karen clenched her jaw, her chest heaving with indignation. I was thinking of the community. That wedding mattered. It brought prestige, connections. What it brought was embarrassment. Another voice snapped, brimming with frustration. Now we're facing legal headaches because of it. I chuckled under my breath, satisfaction rising in steady waves. I'd called it. Karen's power was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. A man with glasses, Elton Hollister, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. There's been talk about a vote. Karen froze. A vote? Lester nodded. To remove you as HOA president. For the first time, real panic flashed across Karen's face. She sat up straighter, shaking her head hard. No, you can't do that. I built this association. I've held it together for 15 years. And in those 15 years, you've abused your power, Delphine shot back, her voice thick with anger. You fined people over nonsense, forced ridiculous rules on us, and now you've cost us tens of thousands of dollars because of your arrogance. Karen gripped the table, her fingers blanching from the pressure. I've always acted in this neighborhood's best interest. A few people let out bitter laughs. Lester sighed, rubbing his forehead. Karen, don't drag this out. We already have the votes to remove you. She shook her head faster, almost desperate. No, you don't. Elton pulled out a thick stack of papers. We do. Karen's breathing turned shallow, frantic. You can't do this. I won't resign. Lester exhaled sharply. Karen, you don't have a choice. The vote's happening now. One by one, hands went up to oust her. Karen's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies, but there were none left. Even her former supporters sat still, hands resting on their laps, unwilling to risk their own reputations for her anymore. It was over. Karen's face went pale as the reality sank in. She'd lost. Completely. The power, the control, her precious HOA presidency, all gone. I decided to speak up, smugness flooding through me. Looks like the neighborhood finally figured out what's really good for it. Karen whipped around to face me, her expression twisted with fury. This is all your fault. I tilted my head, my voice calm. Is it? Did I tell you to take people's money? Did I push you to throw a wedding on my land? Did I force you to lie to everyone here? Karen pressed her lips tight, knowing she couldn't argue with the truth. Lester cleared his throat again. Karen, you have 10 days to step down. After that, we'll elect a new president. Karen shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly across the floor with a piercing screech. Without another word, she stormed out, the door slamming shut behind her. I let out a soft whistle, a wave of relief washing over me. That was fun. The room collectively exhaled, like a weight that had pressed down for years had finally lifted. As I, Wyatt Callahan, turned to leave, Lester Hargrove called after me. Wyatt? I paused, raising an eyebrow. Yeah? He gave a small nod, a hint of sincerity in his expression. Thanks for everything, I smirked. Don't thank me, thank my cows. Lester let out a quiet laugh. Fair enough. I stepped out into the night, a wave of relief spreading through me, like I'd just shaken off months of pent-up pressure. The HOA had finally ousted its biggest menace, and Karen was now just a bad memory. A few days later, 4 days to be exact, an unexpected visitor showed up. Juniper, the bride from that disaster of a wedding, stood at my gate, looking sheepish. I crossed my arms, my tone even. Something I can do for you? She gave an awkward smile, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I just wanted to apologize for everything. I had no idea Karen lied about this place. If I'd known, I never would have gone along with it. I studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. What about the lawsuit? Juniper winced. There isn't one. My dad's suing Karen, though. He's furious. I let out a dry laugh, a flicker of satisfaction passing through me. Can't blame him. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. I took it, opened it, and found a check inside. I raised an eyebrow at her. To cover the mess, Juniper explained, her voice sincere. I know the wedding caused damage to your land. It's the least I can do. I thought about refusing, but then considered the cleanup ahead. I nodded. Thanks. She offered a small smile before turning away. Take care, Wyatt. As Juniper disappeared from view, I glanced down at the check. It wouldn't erase the craziness of the past few days, but it was a decent end to the chaos. Captain Ruckus strutted by, letting out a proud honk like he was celebrating a win. I smirked. You and me both, buddy. I headed back to the house, wondering how long it'd take the HOA to cook up something dumb again. Whatever it was, I'd be ready. Imagine waking up one day to find your private land taken over by strangers just because someone decided they had the right to do it. That's Wyatt Callahan's story. In a modern world where the line between personal and collective rights sometimes blurs, this tale serves as a wake-up call about the importance of listening and respecting each other. Wyatt didn't just defend his land. He showed us that patience, paired with the right actions, can turn adversity into a chance for change. The lesson here isn't just about standing up for yourself. It's about how we can transform conflicts into a push for a fairer community where every voice matters. This story is meant for entertainment and education, not to judge, criticize, or offend any person or group. What do you think about it? Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to explore more stories with me. Thanks for watching this video all the way through. Wishing you a peaceful day, and I'll see you in the next one.